Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going to be looking at globalization, and we're also going to look at an important concept called culture. Now think about what influences you've had in your life to have you take the attitudes and the values and the beliefs that you have today. You were shaped and molded. Not only were you born and formed in your mother's womb, and God did all of that, but society helped shape who you are today as far as your identity and so forth. And it's the same when it comes to culture as far as shaping identity. You know, every company, every organization has its own unique way of doing things, comprised of the people who are in that particular organization, whether it be church or whether it be business. So today, let's take a look at globalization, and let's also take a look today at culture. Well, today, everyone, we're going to continue on in Chapter 2, and today we're going to take a look at globalization, and also we're going to take a look at technology. Now, globalization is the internationalization of business activities, and globalization has been a big strategy. It's played a big part in organizational strategy over the past couple of decades. With the advent of technology, we have seen a globe really shrink to where now we have just international global networks, and that network has allowed us to really revolutionize the way that we do things. So globalization is the business activities, the networks, all of the interrelationships that go on a global scale. And not only that, but competition as well, and the shift toward an integrated global economy. And we see that already in Europe. We see the European Union, which is a confederation of countries that have decided to come together, pool their resources, and come together towards a one currency, one economic system, and so forth. And eventually, I believe it's going to reach us as well. Now, factors that have increased globalization. Well, we have advances in communication and transportation. We can talk anywhere in the world we want to. We can go anywhere in the world we want to. And these things have just emerged over the past couple of decades. So that's increased globalization. We're growth by expansion into international markets. One of the strategies that companies have here in the USA that has made globalization as popular as it has been is that when a company has reached the maturity stage, and that means most everybody in the West has the product and there's really no growth going on anymore for that particular industry or for that particular company, the company can go overseas and start all over again. And that's what we see many companies doing today. Companies that have really no longer life in the West have gone overseas and they've revived themselves. And the contract of labor, or control of labor distribution and distribution costs, has been a major factor in globalization. The cost of an employee and the cost of doing business here in America is very high, especially when you take a look at government regulations and you take a look at union contracts. Just the cost of labor can be quite expensive, whereas in other countries it's not that way. You can have cheaper labor. Now, the argument is that, yeah, you get cheaper labor, but they're not as educated as Americans. So you're going to have an issue with quality and functionality of the organization, all of that. But control of labor, cost of labor, distribution and distribution costs, sometimes it's better just to go over and be closest to your raw material and be able to control your distribution and distribution costs that way. And then increased international competition. Again, we are competing on a global scale now, and that's caused us to have to do more with less so that we can gain that competitive advantage of being still the low-cost leader. So all of these things combined has been really pivotal in increasing our global presence from the West throughout the world and throughout the world here. Now, cross-cultural differences and similarities. What is a culture? Well, think about your culture. Think about the culture you grew up in. How much of an impact does your culture have on you? How much of it still has an impact on you today? Well, the culture is a set of shared values that help people in a group, organization, or society understand which actions are considered acceptable and which are deemed unacceptable. Now, there's some general observations that the author makes here. Cultural and national boundaries may not coincide. So, the diversity today, when you see people of other cultures coming in, they may not have the same loyalties and they may not have the same behaviors that we as Americans have accepted. So we have to be aware of that. And it's the same as us going overseas. For instance, there are some countries that do not allow women to have roles of authority. So that's a big challenge. If we're going to be diverse and we're going to be inclusive and we're going to not discriminate, that's an issue for us. And even religion plays a role in it. You know, there was a lawsuit by a man who was a pilot who wanted to work for a shipping company, and he wanted to fly their products overseas. Well, one of the flight paths that he would have had to have taken was over the place where the Muslims, Mecca, the place where the Muslims worship, and it's forbidden for any non-Muslim to come into Mecca or to fly over Mecca without penalty of death. And that's a very strict law. And the company said, no, we can't hire you because of their culture and their religion. Well, he challenged that, which if they told me I would face certain death, I don't think I would want that job. But they did discriminate. So cultural boundaries are not universal. There are different cultures, and with those cultures, you have different beliefs and values, and as a result, behaviors. Now, behavior in organizational settings vary across cultures. Culture is one major cause of this variation. So, for instance, in Japan, they lean heavily towards ceremony, and if you wanted to do business with the Japanese, our culture here teaches us, let's get the job done, let's get the contract signed, let's get the deal made. Time is money. Let's don't waste time. Let's get to the business of doing business. Well, in Japan, before they do business with you, they want to get to know you. You may spend weeks or months getting to know that individual, play golf with them, have dinner at their house, or let them get to know your family and so forth. They're very personable, and they have a high level of expectation to be able to trust you as a person before they trust you as a business partner and so forth. So that's just one difference in the behaviors of different cultures. Now, I include what I call the iceberg analogy, because oftentimes people see an organization, and I've seen this also ministers with young pastors. They go into an organization or they go into a church and they see things they don't like. People not communicating the way the new individual believes they should be communicating, or things look dysfunctional. Well, what they are looking at are just individual behaviors that are manifested in the way that they talk and the way that they interact and so forth. So what they are looking at, they think, is just a small amount of things that they need to change, and we're going to go in there and change it. So these are behaviors, and they're going to go in and they're going to take care of business, and there are going to be some changes around here, and I'm going to chip off and move this little piece of ice that I call that are behaviors here. But what they fail to realize is what's lying underneath that ice or underneath that water line. Because underneath the water line are values, traditions, attitudes, beliefs, heritage, history. It's difficult for me to write on this, so forgive my grammar or my way I'm writing. But what they don't see are these little facets under the water line. Now, what you think you're going to move is just this little section right here. But in all actuality, you're going to run up against this big mountain of ice. Now, if you remember, the Titanic hit this little chunk right here. And what happened to it? The ice is still there, but the Titanic is gone. And that's what happens to pastors and to managers who think that they can collide with this little chunk of ice when in fact they've got this whole iceberg to deal with. So this is an idea of culture. Culture, really at the heart of culture, you see this. What's manifested is this. So this is what you have to focus on here. These are the things that you need to be familiar with and aware of if you're going to change things. But this is an idea, should give you an idea of how influential culture is and how important it is. And just because it may seem non-productive to you, if that's the way they do business and it's getting it done the way that they're doing it, you might want to sit back and take a look at the virtues of that behavior before you try to change it. Now, there are general observations that we make about cultural differences and similarities. Organizations and the way they are structured appear to be growing increasingly similar. And I believe that's the reason for that is because we're moving towards what we call organizational learning strategies, organic structures, learning organizations. These are all terms that are used for organizations that are trying to be sensitive to the worker, trying to develop them and spending more time developing and training than to just try to get them to work and do the job. They're trying to enrich them and give them more autonomy so that they can be better producers. The same individuals behave differently in different cultural settings. Cultural diversity can be an important source of synergy in enhancing organizational effectiveness, and that goes without saying. The more heads you get into a problem, if they're working positively, then you can garner the benefits of that because you're going to have diversity of opinions, diversity of options, and when they come to a conclusion, normally it's going to be the result of collaboration and discussion and coming up with the one best alternative or solution to whatever problem you have. Now, Geert Hofstede's research, he noticed certain cultural, behavioral differences in people, and he categorized these. And he says that attitudes and behaviors differ significantly because of values and beliefs that characterize different countries. So his categories, first of all, include individualism. Well, what is individualism? Well, as the name implies, it emphasizes the individual. We in the West are individuals. We live in an individualistic society. That means we promote self. The practice of employee of the month, employee parking, employee bonus, all of those emphasize the person. Now, we do have group bonuses at times and company bonuses and all of that, but I have yet to see a group parking lot or a group parking of the month. But individualism, that's really prized by our culture here, and it's not so in other places. For instance, in Japan, there's a collectivist attitude, and the collectivist says that the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one. Now, if you're a Star Trek fan, you probably heard Spock say that in one of those movies. But that's truth. That's the collectivist attitude. They see themselves, in this case the Japanese, as just one person contributing among many to the overall welfare of the whole. So to them, Employee of the Month is unheard of. In fact, it's an offense. They believe that everybody's efforts should be recognized and so forth, and that everybody has an obligation to the whole to contribute. Power distance, and that's the distance between levels of authority and so forth. Uncertainty avoidance is a person's comfort with not knowing the future, risk-taking and so forth. Some people don't want to take risks, and they have a high level of uncertainty avoidance. Some are risk takers, and they will take those risks at times. But that's needed. Risk is needed if you're going to be innovative and set on the forefront. Now, you don't need to be irresponsible. So that level of uncertainty is another cultural aspect of individuals and cultures. Masculinity. There are some countries that are Mexico, the Middle East. These are masculine types of cultures, and they see women as weaker. So you may have issues sending a woman executive to these places and having them perform because of the culture. And then long-term orientation, which means that many people are looking for short-term results. Others have a long-term orientation, such as the Japanese and so forth. With us, let's get the job done, let's get on schedule, and let's get it completed and move on to something else. And not everybody will be that hasty. Now, here is the breakdown of those that I just explained to you, so I'll let you guys take a look at that, and just keep those in mind because you may see them again on a test. Now, let's move on to technology. Technology are the methods used to create products including both physical goods and intangible services. How has technology changed the way organizations do business? Well, if you have gone to a Walmart or if you've gone to a grocery store, you've probably seen these self-checkout centers, and that's how technology is changing the face of things. Every time you go to a self-checkout aisle, you have replaced a worker. And very soon we're going to be seeing even more people replace as we start to replace humans with robotics in warehouses. Amazon today, if you go online and YouTube Amazon, you'll see their operation and you'll see very few humans in Amazon. They are really the ones who are there are managing the robotics that are actually doing all the work. So, and I even heard Amazon is going to be sending drones out now to deliver packages and things. So technology is changing the way we do business. Now, I feel sorry for young people because they can't move up in business and technology is replacing them all. So what's going to be the future for them? Who knows? But from an organizational standpoint, we have to understand that technology is one of those things that really should be making some people nervous. We're worried about diversity when the robotics and the technology is taking people's jobs away. Manufacturing organization is just a form of business that transforms the raw material into tangible outcomes that are then sold. And these are products. It's not a service, it's a product. Because service organizations offer something that's intangible. They transform resources into something that is really not physical, but it does provide utility. It does provide something for the customer. For instance, we are a service industry, you could say, in college. An education is not something you can hold. You can hold the degree, but you can't see or hold an education. So that's an intangible output that we provide to you as we take you from school or from the environment. We transform you into a graduate, and then the put would be the completed graduate who is leaving the school into the workforce. So that would be an example of a service organization. Now, challenges for technology leaders maintaining a leadership position. Technology is the basis of competition for some firms. You take a look at Microsoft and you take a look at the computer industry and all of that. It's a heavy source of challenge for some companies. Coping with decreasing cycle times, that's getting the product out from start to finish quicker than your competitors. And then you have advances in information technology, which one is to have a leaner and more flexible organization with increased collaboration and improved management processes and systems. You can do a lot more today than you've ever been able to do before with technology. And then the disadvantages is that you have less personal communication, less downtime, or increased sense of communication and decision-making urgency. So you have that, you've taken the personal element out of it. I used to manage all of the Navy Reserve recruiters throughout the country. There were 930. I never saw any of them. I never had to talk to any of them. But yet I could sit behind my computer console and with technology manage all of their careers. Now in the past that was unheard of. You had divisions and you had regions and you had geographic boundaries and so forth. And you had to have supervisors and managers do all of that to manage these careers. Today, you can do it with one person sitting at one desk behind one computer. And think about the money in the private sector you can save by having just one person there doing it all. But you do lose that cohesion. You do lose that personal communication or that personal touch. So it's going to be interesting to see how globalization and how diversity and how technology, just with what we've seen so far, just a little sample of these, hopefully has opened your eyes to how quickly things are changing and how profound those changes are. As you can see, culture is a very important element in organizations. And when a person goes in and they're going to change the culture or change the way people do things, a lot of times it ends up in disaster. So today I hope by looking at our iceberg analogy and taking a look at some of the elements that comprise culture, you gain a better appreciation, but also understand that organizations are unique. They're unique not only in the nature of their business, but they're also unique in the people who make it up. So today, I hope you've been able to gain a better appreciation for the people in the organizations, and we'll see you tomorrow.